The day France outlawed UFOs. There is something quietly wonderful about the way a rumor begins, not with a proclamation, but with a whisper. And one of the gentlest, strangest whispers in modern folklore is this: that the French government once passed a law forbidding flying saucers to land in the nation's vineyards. At first glance, the claim seems like pure comedy, a rule against extraterrestrial picnics among the grapes. But like all good absurdities, it hides a small, perfect truth. There really was an official decree issued in the south of France, banning unidentified flying objects from alighting on agricultural land. It was written in formal legal language, signed by a mayor and posted in the local record. The year was 1954, a season that would later be called l'année des soucoupes volantes, the year of the flying saucers. Across Europe, newspapers filled with reports of mysterious lights, metallic discs, and silent visitors crossing the skies. France, modern yet mystical, took to the story with enthusiasm. In farm villages and wine towns, people looked upward with wonder and a little fear. Something seemed to be happening above them, something beyond explanation. The authorities, as always, tried to respond with order. And in the little Provençal commune of Châteauneuf-du-Pape, the mayor decided to do so with style. A village among vines. Châteauneuf-du-Pape is one of those places that seem to exist outside of time. Stone houses, narrow lanes, and the long roll of vineyards stretching toward the Rhône River. Its name, the Pope's new castle, recalls the 14th century, when the papacy briefly left Rome for nearby Avignon and built its summer fortress here. By the middle of the 20th century, the fortress was a ruin, but the wines were world-famous. Châteauneuf-du-Pape had become a symbol of French craftsmanship, patient, earthy, and proud. The vines were its lifeblood, tended by families who measured time not in years, but in vintages. So when tales of strange flying craft began to fill the newspapers, the people of this village watched the skies over their vines with equal parts curiosity and concern. To them, a vineyard was sacred ground, a balance of soil, sun and labour too delicate to risk to any nonsense from outer space. And so, on a bright autumn morning, Mayor Lucien Jeune put pen to paper and drafted a proclamation that would make history. The proclamation. It began formally, as all French decrees do. We, the mayor of Châteauneuf-du-Pape, considering that flying saucers or flying cigars could constitute a danger to the property of our vineyards. From there, the mayor declared that any aircraft, whether known or unknown, of terrestrial or extraterrestrial origin, was forbidden to land, take off, or fly over the commune's vineyards. In the event of violation, the object would be immediately impounded by the municipal police. The tone was official. The language was serious, but the humour was unmistakable. No one truly expected to see a saucer settling between the vines. Yet, by putting the rule into writing, the mayor transformed rumour into ritual. He took the anxiety of his citizens and turned it into something gentle, something they could laugh about while feeling protected. When the decree was posted on the town hall wall, people gathered to read it aloud and chuckle. Reporters took photographs. The story spread to Paris, then to London, then to New York. The world adored it. The village became, for a moment, the capital of earthly good sense in an age of cosmic hysteria. France and the flying saucers. To understand why that little decree resonated so widely, one must remember the mood of the 1950s. The Second World War had ended less than a decade before. France was rebuilding its confidence, its technology, its identity. The Cold War had begun, and with it came both scientific optimism and existential dread. When people saw strange lights in the sky, they did not know whether to imagine angels, aliens, or foreign spies. Newspapers mixed skepticism with sensationalism. Each new sighting was treated as a sign of the changing world, of machines and mysteries beyond human control. In that climate, Châteauneuf-du-Pape's ban was perfect satire. It acknowledged the fear without indulging it. It reminded people that even in the age of rockets, the French spirit remained unshakably local. Let the superpowers race for the heavens. The villagers of Provence would defend their vines. The mayor as storyteller. Lucien Jeune, the man behind the decree, was more than a bureaucrat. He was a showman, a lover of spectacle. Born in the early 1900s, he had grown up in the rhythms of the countryside and understood how laughter could bind a community. His edict was part joke, part publicity, and entirely sincere in its affection for the land. By making international headlines, he achieved something remarkable. He reminded the world that French humour was as refined as its wine, dry, precise, and never wasted. Tourists wrote letters to the town. Wine merchants used the story in their advertising. The phrase interdiction des soucoupes volantes appeared on postcards. Even those who doubted the existence of UFOs admired the mayor's wit. And those who believed in them felt oddly reassured. At least, if the aliens came, someone had set boundaries, a law of the heart. In time, the decree faded from official memory. But it never disappeared from local pride. It still hangs, framed, in the mayor's office, a relic of the moment when a small French town answered cosmic uncertainty with humour and poise. It was never repealed, for there was no need. The law remains in symbolic force, protecting the vineyards from celestial visitors with quiet absurdity. And so, as the sun sets over the Rhône and the air fills with the scent of ripening grapes, one might look upward and smile at the thought that somewhere in the vast universe, a cautious pilot in a flying saucer consults his map and decides, wisely, to steer clear of Châteauneuf-du-Pape. The year of the flying saucers. 1954 was not just another year in France. It was the year when the skies seemed to come alive, when farmers, soldiers, and ordinary townspeople claimed to see shapes of light darting above the fields. From Normandy to the Riviera, from the Alps to Brittany, stories of soucoupes volantes, flying saucers, filled the newspapers. For weeks, the front pages were covered not with politics or sport, but with maps of sightings. Dotted lines traced the supposed paths of mysterious craft across the countryside. Every morning, readers gathered at cafes, pointing at the headlines, arguing about what it all meant. Some saw omens, some saw opportunity. Others saw only the proof that the world had finally gone mad. There were reports of cigar-shaped objects landing in fields, of bright domes hovering above churches, of beams of light seen from trains at night. In the village of Quarouble, a railway worker swore he had met two small beings who emerged from a metal machine. In another town, a farmer claimed his tractor had been lifted briefly into the air by invisible hands. Even the skeptical grew uneasy. Something was happening, or at least something was being believed. The social mood of the time. To understand how such stories took hold, one must imagine the world of mid-20th century France. The war had left deep scars, not only on buildings, but on minds. People were rebuilding their lives among ruins and memories. The nation was modernizing, but memories of chaos still lingered. Trust in institutions was fragile. At the same time, science was advancing faster than imagination could keep up. The atomic bomb had shown humanity's power to destroy. Jet aircraft had erased the boundaries of distance. Radar, rockets and radio waves had become everyday miracles. The boundary between the known and the unknown felt thinner than ever before. Flying saucers then became symbols of that uncertainty, half hope, half fear. To some, they represented salvation, a sign that intelligent beings watched over a fragile world. To others, they were omens of invasion or doom. Every light in the night sky became a question, and France, poetic and curious, began to dream upward. The newspapers fanned the flames. By autumn, the French press had transformed the UFO craze into daily theatre. Each morning brought a new story. Strange object seen near Bordeaux. Luminous disc frightens peasants. Flying cigar observed by police patrol. Reporters competed to outdo one another in vivid detail. Illustrators sketched silver discs against dark skies, their beams cutting through clouds. Small-town mayors were interviewed about the best response if a saucer landed near the school. For weeks, the stories displaced war and politics on the front pages. The people wanted wonder. The journalists were happy to provide it. In Paris, intellectuals debated the phenomenon as though it were art. Were these sightings hallucinations born of Cold War anxiety? Or were they glimpses of a new chapter in cosmic history? Scientists dismissed them as atmospheric illusions, while philosophers mused that even if they were false, their meaning was true. For what could reveal the modern soul more clearly than its desire to be visited? A nation of dreamers and skeptics. France has always been a land of both reason and romance. Descartes and Dumas, logic and longing in the same breath. And so it was in 1954. Some citizens took the sources seriously, building amateur telescopes and tracking reports like scientists. Others turned the whole affair into comedy. Cafes sold drinks called Le Cocktail Soucoupe Volante. Cartoonists drew aliens wearing berets and holding baguettes. A Paris newspaper published a joke headline, "Martians refuse visa. Blame bureaucracy." The people laughed, but beneath the laughter lay fascination. The skies had become a mirror for their imagination. And it was into this atmosphere, a mixture of awe and amusement, that the mayor of Châteauneuf-du-Pape released his famous decree. The timing could not have been better. While the rest of the nation debated whether UFOs were real, he declared that they were welcome nowhere near his vineyards. It was humour at its finest, a local law written in the language of logic to protect against a fantasy no one could prove. How the decree became legend. The story spread like sunlight on wine. Parisian papers ran headlines such as "Vineyards off limits to Martians." Foreign journalists adored it. French town bans flying saucers, announced an American wire service, protects vintage from space invaders. The idea was too perfect to resist. A nation famous for wine defending its grapes from interplanetary trespassers. Radio hosts read the decree on air, their voices shaking with laughter. "Imagine," one said, "an alien pilot consulting a flight map and seeing a red line drawn over the Rhône Valley." The decree became not only a joke, but a symbol of French wit, that special blend of logic and irony that turns fear into charm. Where others saw menace in the unknown, the French turned it into theatre, the power of humour. Lucien Jeun's proclamation worked because it restored control to the people. When faced with something vast and incomprehensible, be it the cosmos, war, or change itself, humour becomes the last defence of dignity. By laughing, one asserts mastery over the unknown. The mayor's law was not about aliens, it was about courage. It told his citizens that they could face mystery without losing themselves to panic. And that message resonated far beyond Provence. Across the world the decree was quoted, translated, and admired as an act of cultural poise. Even now, decades later, when travellers visit Châteauneuf-du-Pape and hear the tale, they smile not because it is absurd, but because it feels wise. It captures the eternal French lesson that to live gracefully is to respond to chaos with style. The skies calm again. By the end of 1954, the frenzy faded. The skies, once alive with rumour, returned to their usual quiet. Scientists explained away most sightings as misidentified stars, meteors and aircraft. The newspapers moved on to other stories. The year of the flying saucers passed into legend. But in Châteauneuf-du-Pape, the law remained. It had become part of the village identity, as enduring as the taste of its wines. It survived not as bureaucracy, but as a reminder of that peculiar autumn when the entire nation looked upward and dreamed. And perhaps in some unseen corner of the universe, those dreams are still floating, drifting gently over the Rhône Valley, careful not to disturb the vines. From decree to folklore. As the noise of the flying saucer craze faded, the decree of Châteauneuf-du-Pape remained like a small but shining coin at the bottom of a fountain. A curious artifact that people continue to discover and toss new wishes upon. By the early 1960s, the law was already legend. Travellers visiting the Rhône Valley heard whispers about it in cafes and tasting rooms. "You know," a waiter might say with a wink, "our mayor once banned flying saucers from the Vineyards." And the visitor would laugh, unsure whether it was true, and pour another glass of ruby red wine. This was how folklore begins, not with grand events, but with small stories that linger because they make people smile. France in the Age of Wonder. The 1960s were years of optimism and upheaval. Technology was transforming life faster than anyone could quite follow. Satellites orbited the Earth, jetliners crossed oceans, and televisions brought the world into living rooms. The idea of space travel, once fantasy, became almost ordinary. In that world, the mayor's decree took on a new flavour. It no longer seemed to mock belief in the extraordinary. Rather, it celebrated the spirit of curiosity itself. If humans were to reach for the stars, they should do so with wit, dignity, and a respect for the earth, especially for the vineyards that fed both their tables and their souls. In a way, the law embodied the perfect balance between progress and preservation. In Châteauneuf-du-Pape, the flying saucer decree became part of the local charm. Guides recited the story during tastings. Shops sold postcards depicting aliens fleeing from grapevines. Local artists painted whimsical scenes of little green beings being chased away by stern French farmers waving corkscrews like swords. The decree had evolved into a living piece of folklore, a story retold not for its legal value, but for its laughter. Visitors adored it. The tale seemed to sum up everything they loved about France: its playfulness, its pride, and its refusal to take itself too seriously. The world may have been racing toward technology and noise, but here was a place that could make even a cosmic invasion sound poetic. The mystery of the text. Over time, researchers and journalists tried to locate the original document. Some found versions of it in municipal archives, others claimed it was half myth, passed along by memory. The phrasing itself, delightfully formal, was said to read, Any aircraft known as flying saucer or flying cigar, which should land on the territory of the commune, will be immediately detained. The occupants, if any, will be placed under arrest. Whether the law was ever enforced was irrelevant. Its mere existence was enough to secure its place in legend. Scholars debated whether it had been written in jest or earnest, but the truth was likely both. In France, wit and wisdom often share a single glass. The law becomes a mirror. As decades passed, the flying saucer law became a mirror reflecting how societies deal with fear, change, and absurdity. In the 1950s, it had mocked hysteria. In the 1960s, it celebrated calm in a modernizing world. By the 21st century, it symbolized something deeper, the human need to turn anxiety into art. Because what was the decree, really, if not a small act of artistic defiance? A reminder that even in the face of mystery, humanity can respond with elegance, humour and control. It turned the chaos of rumour into a performance of civility, a bureaucratic wink at the cosmos. And that perhaps is why it endured. The local spirit. To the people of Châteauneuf-du-Pape, the decree became part of their identity. It symbolized the independence and self-assurance that had always defined the village. For centuries, their land had been fought over by popes, princes and armies. Yet through it all, the vineyards remained. They belonged not to conquerors, but to the soil, the sun, and the hands that tended them. So, when a mayor in 1954 declared that no flying saucers would disturb that peace, his words echoed a far older sentiment, that the land was sacred and that those who worked it would protect it, even from visitors from the stars. The people did not take the law literally. They took it as a toast, a promise that no matter what madness the world above might bring, life below would remain deliciously human. A toast to absurdity. Every autumn, as grapes ripened and the air filled with the scent of fermenting wine, locals would tell the story again. Sometimes they told it to amuse children, sometimes to entertain tourists, sometimes simply because it felt good to remember a time when fear could be turned into laughter. The law had become a ritual of resilience, an annual celebration of humour's quiet power. In its absurdity, it reminded people of their capacity to stay grounded amid uncertainty. After all, if a mayor could joke with the universe, then perhaps so could they. And so, in the gentle rhythm of harvests and seasons, the legend of the flying saucer decree became inseparable from the taste of the wine itself. Rich, complex, and with a lingering note of irony. The vineyard as philosophy. A vineyard, after all, is not merely a field of plants. It is a metaphor for time, patience, and care. Every vine carries generations of memory. Every bottle captures a year's worth of sunlight and rain. The decree of 1954, in its own small way, became part of that cycle. A story harvested and retold, mellowing with age. Visitors who hear it today might laugh, but beneath the laughter there is recognition. For the world remains uncertain, full of mysteries and fears. Yet the lesson of Châteauneuf-du-Pape endures. Face the unknown with grace and protect what makes life beautiful, even if it means writing a law against imaginary invaders. The legend grows in the modern age. As the 20th century gave way to the 21st, most of the world forgot the flying saucer fever that had once gripped entire nations. The Cold War had ended, the space age had matured, and humankind had sent probes to planets that the old stories once imagined filled with visitors. Yet somehow, in the small Provençal commune of Châteauneuf-du-Pape, the decree of 1954 continued to live on. It no longer existed as a legal instrument, nor as a relic of fear. It had transformed into something more enduring, a symbol of balance between reason and imagination. For in a world that had become faster, louder and more digital, the idea that a mayor had once banned flying saucers from the Vineyards felt like a poem from another age. It reminded people that history could still smile, rediscovered by the curious. In the early years of the internet, old stories began to resurface. Lists of strange laws still on the books appeared in magazines and on websites, somewhere between laws about walking pigs on leashes in London and banning chewing gum in Singapore. Readers found the line, "In Châteauneuf-du-Pape, France, flying saucers are forbidden to land in the vineyards." It was irresistible. The sentence spread like wildfire. Late-night radio hosts recited it between conspiracy theories. Travel writers included it in their guides. Even news anchors, smiling through their closing segments, mentioned it as a curious fact about human eccentricity. And so, half a century after Lucien Jeune penned his decree, it found a new audience, one that was larger and more amused than ever before. Documentaries and delight. Television crews arrived. Documentary makers, searching for stories of whimsy, drove through the Rhône Valley with cameras and notebooks. They interviewed winemakers, historians and elderly villagers who remembered the 1950s. In one such interview, an old farmer, his hands rough from pruning vines, chuckled as he recalled the moment he first heard about the decree. He said, "When the mayor announced it, we thought he had drunk one barrel too many, but we laughed and we drank another. It was a good year." The filmmakers loved lines like that. They framed shots of vineyards shimmering under the sun, of bottles being corked, of corks popping like tiny rockets. The narrative practically wrote itself, a tale of French wit, aged like wine that never soured. A law that became a brand. Local businesses, ever perceptive, realized the charm of the decree. Wineries began printing playful labels inspired by it. Some featured tiny sketches of flying saucers hovering nervously above grapevines. Others used the phrase décret anti-soucoupe volante as a wink to tradition. Tourists adored it. They would buy a bottle not only for its flavour, but for the story that came with it. The decree had become a brand, not in a cynical sense, but as a natural extension of local pride. It told the world that Châteauneuf-du-Pape was not only a producer of fine wine, but also a custodian of humour, of perspective, of humanity itself. Even in an age of global marketing, this story could not be manufactured. It was authentic, absurd, and beautifully French. The global smile. Across the ocean, in countries where the name Châteauneuf-du-Pape was hard to pronounce, people still shared the story. It appeared on social media, in trivia books, and in podcasts about curious laws. The image of a French mayor protecting his vineyards from aliens became a small, enduring joke. A smile shared between strangers who might never taste the wine, but loved the spirit behind it. It is strange how legends travel. A single act of wit in 1954, a few lines written with a pen, ended up circling the world, carried not by flying saucers, but by laughter. The decree, born in the shadow of Cold War hysteria, became an emblem of peace, patience, and perspective. The philosophy beneath the humour. Behind the laughter lay something serious, almost philosophical. The decree reminded people that not all laws need to be made out of fear or necessity. Some can be acts of art, declarations of joy, sanity or irony in times when the world seems to lose both. Lucien Jeune's words were never meant to punish anyone. They were a gesture, a statement that even in a time of confusion, humour could still govern. And perhaps that is why the story continues to move people. It represents a rare kind of wisdom, the ability to meet absurdity, not with anger, but with a smile and a pen. In this way, the decree became more than a relic. It became a teaching, a reflection of the French soul. Every nation has its symbols. For France, there is the Eiffel Tower, the baguette, the beret, and now, somewhere in that collection, a flying saucer band. It embodies a national trait that foreigners often notice but rarely name, a love of elegance, even in the ridiculous. To the French, a good story is like a good wine, complex, layered, and best enjoyed slowly. The decree of Châteauneuf-du-Pape offered both flavour and philosophy. It said, in essence, if the world must be absurd, then let us at least be absurd beautifully. And so, year after year, the story aged gracefully, growing richer in meaning, like a vintage bottle tucked away in a cellar, waiting for the right moment to be opened again. Echoes across time. By the 2010s, the story had been told in countless ways, as humour, as history, as folklore. Yet in the village itself, life remained much as it always had. The vines grew, the sun ripened the grapes, and the Rhône continued its patient flow. The decree existed quietly in the background, part of the rhythm of local identity. To outsiders, it was comedy. To the people of Châteauneuf-du-Pape, it was a kind of heritage. They understood that their little law was not about aliens or sorcerers, but about something far more human, the need to preserve joy even in uncertain times. Because when one looks closely at history, it is not the grand wars or inventions that sustain a culture's heart. It is the stories, especially the ones that make us laugh while reminding us who we are. The weight of lightness. And so, as the 21st century matured, the decree of 1954 remained untouched. The world had grown heavier with information, with noise, with speed. Yet the small village law, whimsical, irrelevant, perfect, reminded people that lightness has its own gravity. The power of a smile, after all, is immense. It can travel across time, cross borders, and outlast empires. The decree of Châteauneuf-du-Pape was proof of that. A single moment of laughter had survived generations of change. It had become a bridge between fear and joy, absurdity and wisdom. And beneath it all, the vineyards kept growing, patient, silent, eternal. The last vineyard under the stars. If you stand today on one of the hills of Châteauneuf-du-Pape, as evening descends, you see what generations have seen before you. Rows of vines stretching like green verses across the land, the air rich with the scent of dust and sweetness, the Rhône glittering below like a ribbon of silver thought. The sun falls behind the old stone ruins of the papal castle, and for a moment the light feels ancient, as though the centuries themselves have paused to breathe. It is in that quiet that the legend of the flying saucer law seems most alive. Not as a story of aliens or absurdities, but as a whisper of how human beings respond to the unknown. The decree has long since passed from law into memory, yet its spirit endures, graceful, amused, defiant in the gentlest way. It tells us that there is more than one kind of strength. Some nations build monuments, others build myths. France, in 1954, built a smile. The art of defiance through laughter. Laughter, when sincere, is an act of courage. It says, I see the chaos around me, and still I choose to remain human. The mayor's decree was exactly that. At a time when the world feared invasion from beyond, whether from space or from ideology, one small village declared its sovereignty in the language of wit. There would be no panic here, no hysteria, no trembling under the stars. There would only be the calm authority of a pen signing a proclamation to the cosmos. We will protect our peace, even if the intruders are imaginary. In that gesture lies a kind of philosophy. The belief that humour is not the opposite of seriousness, but its highest form. To joke in the face of fear is to transcend it. To laugh at the absurd is to rob it of its power. That, perhaps, is what makes the Châteauneuf-du-Pape decree feel timeless. How the law became a lesson. Over time, the story has become something larger than itself. Teachers use it as an example of how societies express identity through absurdity. Philosophers cite it as proof that irony can be a moral stance. Psychologists see in it a case study of collective imagination, of how fear can be transformed into play. But perhaps the most important lesson is simpler. The decree reminds us that civilization depends not only on laws, but on laughter. Laws tell us what we must do. Laughter tells us how to endure it. Without humour, rules become brittle. With it, even the strangest regulation, a ban on flying saucers over vineyards, becomes a poem about human resilience. Wine, wisdom and wonder. The people of Châteauneuf-du-Pape still make wine the way their ancestors did, carefully, patiently, with reverence for the land. They know that good wine cannot be rushed, and that truth, like flavour, deepens with time. Their decree from 1954 has aged the same way. It began as satire, matured into folklore, and finally settled into philosophy. It tells us that imagination is not the enemy of reason, but its companion. That even the most rational people need stories to stay whole. And perhaps that is why the legend continues to attract travellers, dreamers and storytellers. They come for the wine, but stay for the laughter. They raise a glass not only to taste, but to remember. That once upon a time, a mayor looked at the madness of the world and chose to answer it with grace. The legacy of the sky and the vine. When night finally settles over Provence, the stars return. The same stars that inspired poets and frightened farmers, that led ancient sailors across dark waters, that once made the people of France believe that something, or someone, might be watching them. Those stars still hang above the vineyards, quiet and untouchable. No saucer has ever landed among the grapes. No cosmic visitor has ever disturbed the harvest. But perhaps in some secret way the decree has worked after all. Perhaps it was never meant to protect vines from aliens, but people from fear. The law stands, not in the legal sense, but in the moral one. It stands as a reminder that imagination, when met with laughter, becomes strength. That the unknown, when faced with humour, becomes art. And that somewhere between the sky and the soil, humanity finds its balance. The final reflection. It is easy to laugh at the past, to mock the fears, the fashions, the follies of those who came before us. But every age has its absurdities, and every generation needs its own Châteauneuf-du-Pape, a place or a spirit that reminds it how to stay gentle in a world that can be unkind. The mayor's decree endures because it speaks to something eternal, the human refusal to let dread win. It invites us across time and language to share a smile, to believe that civility can be witty and that even in the face of cosmic mystery, the right response may simply be to pour another glass and carry on. So, if you ever find yourself under the Provençal stars, listening to the hum of night insects and the faint rustle of leaves, think of Lucien Jeune. Think of his quiet joke written in a year of hysteria. And remember that humour, like wine, like love, is best when shared. Raise your glass, then, to the law that banned flying saucers, to the village that turned fear into laughter, and to the truth that endures long after legends fade, that the heart of humanity lies not in the power to control the world, but in the grace to smile at its absurdity.